Good evening, everybody. John Arvos is here in Chicago. How's everybody doing? Friday. I saw Syndicate ranting about Friday earlier. I don't just, where do we go? There we go. Somebody told me I should have my head in the point of the ceiling. Apparently, it's a feng shui thing or something for video. So who am I to disagree? Anyway, hello, everybody. Hoping this is working. Let me just see my TikTok. Make sure it's live. It is live. Lovely. All righty. Good. Hey, guys. I can see the TikTokers. Excellent. As always, we'll wait a minute just for a few more folks to come on, and then we'll dig right in. No, actually, I've got a little suspicion as to how I do this. We'll have to see. Anyway, we'll see if the TikTokers show up or not. I think I may screw something up when I'm launching this. Still figuring out how to launch this thing correctly. But we will take another minute or two for folks to filter in. And lots of good news today. I mean, like kind of crazy good news. It's insane how well the Ukrainians are doing. Really good stuff. So that will be a lot of our discussion today. I also have, I think, 5 videos I want to show you, which I think are very interesting. So Jody Johnson just became a top 1 viewer. Woo! Hola, senor. Oh, boy. Anyway, guys, like I said, maybe another minute or so, wait for a few more TikTokers to show up. As I was saying, I think I may screw things up because I've got to launch TikTok first to get the codes, to put it in the system, to feed to TikTok. And I think when I do it 5 minutes early, it may screw things up on TikTok. Anyway, thank you for the heart there on TikTok. But we'll see. In any case, next time I'll do it closer in case it's screwing things up. But anyway, and yesterday, just so folks know, TikTok totally melted down. Thank you for the swinging man. TikTok totally melted down yesterday. That was what happened when the TikTokers got kicked off. Apparently, TikTok itself melted down and like cut off for all TikTokers everywhere. So not good. Ooh la. Anyway, hi LaShawn and Marky. So folks, actually, as always, do give a little shout out from where you're from, if you would. And actually, we'll get going right now, I think. Just so folks know, for TikTok, actually, in general, I've got the little banner at the bottom. As I said, I do work off of donations. I'm still trying to do this full time. It ain't much money. So I appreciate you guys' donations because you're helping me keep doing this work. So thank you. For TikTok, the only question is don't do the hats and the glasses. When I stream this way where I've got the neat banners and stuff, on TikTok, the glasses and the hats don't work. So you're going to be contributing to me, but you're not going to be seeing your hat and glasses. Every other thing on TikTok works. So the swinging man you just had was cool. The C at the bottom is cool. So butterflies work. Anyway, just so you guys know. Let's get right going. So this Kharkiv offensive is huge and really effective from what we're seeing. So Ukraine, maybe 3-4 days ago, launched an offensive in the northeast. And I've got to see, actually, hold on a second. I can switch my settings here. Mirror my, actually, is my camera already mirrored or not? Oh, nope, hold on. Let's mirror. There we go. All right. I'm wearing my map t-shirt today so I can show you. So Kharkiv, all the way over here in the northeast of Ukraine, is the second largest city in Ukraine, 1.5 million people. And actually, I promise you, I was getting a map set up and then I didn't have time, so we'll deal with this. Notice where Kharkiv is. It is literally, where's Kharkiv? Where's Kharkiv? Here's Kharkiv. It is literally on the border with Russia. All of this is Russia, the red over here. Right, so look at how close it is. Kharkiv itself, the city is free, but the region, a lot of the region was taken by the Russians. And then when you get sort of down from Kharkiv. So we're talking Kharkiv itself is free. This area, all of this is occupied by Russians. Okay, so like all of this, all the way this up here. The battle that's going on right now in Kharkiv is happening more or less around here is where it's happening. I'll stop pointing to my nipple because maybe that's a little weird. I don't know. But that's the big battle that's been going on the last few days. And it is going ridiculously well for the Ukrainians by all accounts. I mean, this is on the order. This is actually better, I think, from what I'm reading, than the Ukrainians even did with the Russians coming down from the north. Because the Russians were coming down from the north to take Kyiv, And, it was sort of a month-long process. They were stalling the Russians. In this case, the Ukrainians have like blitzed right through the Russian front lines and destroyed them. I mean, it's the amount of land they've gotten. Let me kind of go through some of this. Actually, you know what? Let me show you first. First, I was going to show you really quick a national anthem that the Ukrainian troops were singing, allegedly, reportedly, right before they began this offensive. I just think it's only about 30 seconds, but I thought it was a beautiful video, and it just, again, sort of encapsulates the spirit of all of this. So let me just show you this really quick. Now, Zelensky says that over 30 settlements have been liberated already, 30 villages and towns in eastern Ukraine. I was just watching CNN. They said they're hearing from some people that it may be twice that number. 60 settlements in just the last 2 or 3 days liberated. I mean, a ridiculous amount that the Ukrainians advanced something like, God, as of yesterday, I think they advanced like 20 kilometers, which is maybe 12, 13 miles. You've got to remember, it took the Russians a month to advance a couple miles, right? And the Ukrainians in a day or two pushed back like 13, 15 miles. Now, give you a little more background on this. Actually, you know what? One other thing I was going to show you really quick. So I've got a bunch of videos and they can kind of fit in anywhere. A liberation video that was really cute. I've got a couple of them. I'm going to show you one a little later, but I wanted to show you one to start with, which is showing the townspeople coming out. Actually, this one, okay, I'm looking at them as I see. This one is a woman, an older Ukrainian woman, looking out her fence, and she sees some soldiers approaching, and she starts to freak out because she thinks they're Russian. And then all of a sudden, you hear the Ukrainian guy say, Slava Ukraini, right? Like, glory to Ukraine. And she's still kind of looking at him. And then he says in Ukrainian, and somebody translate this for me, it's us, like it's our guys. It's our guys that are here, basically like, no, we're with you. And watch then what she does. It's just amazing.
Слава Україні! Да, свої.
Just figured it out. Now, the thing you got to remember is this is Eastern Ukraine, where most of these people probably speak Russian. Like that's their first language. And, so much of the Russian story was that, the Russians would be greeted as liberators. And the whole reason they had to invade is because Russian-speaking Ukrainians were being oppressed by, the Ukrainian-speaking majority, blah, blah, blah. And nothing could be further from the truth. I had actually shown you a video yesterday of some of the women who were embracing the troops, and I thought I heard them speaking Russian, and it was somebody else, a Ukrainian, was looking at it and said the women who were saying thank you for liberating us were speaking Russian, and the troops were speaking to them in Ukrainian. So these were troops that probably were brought up in other parts of Ukraine, but just to show you the turning on its head of the whole Russian war propaganda, right? It's Russian speakers that are crying, saying, thank you so much, Ukrainian troops, for liberating us, right? Just very interesting. So what's going on with this? Lots of ammunition. A couple different good things going on here. The Ukrainians have made such an advance. The Russians have abandoned their positions. They've abandoned a lot of ammunition. They've abandoned a lot of equipment. I was watching just a picture earlier today of some Russian howitzers that are, according to the defense guys, very high quality howitzers, artillery pieces that the Russians left behind. Pictures of a lot of ammunition they left behind. Now, in talking to some of the folks, the ammunition depends. The Ukrainians can use it, which is good. Because one advantage of the Ukrainians having many of the same weapons as the Russians, because both of them were part of the Soviet Union. So they both inherited Soviet weapons, right? Is that a lot of the Russian ammunition works in the, thank you for the TikTok money there. A lot of the Russian ammunition works in the Ukrainian weapons, but, there's always issues with Russian ammunition. The Russians do not store their ammunition well. It's very old. So, there's still, let's see, but this howitzer apparently was a big deal, and a lot of the tanks are a big deal. To give you just a few more details. So let me see, I'm going to see if I can, throw I've got this picture, and I'm going to see if I can just throw it up of the map. Maybe I can. We're all experimenting here, folks. I think I can throw this up here. Hang on. This might work. Come on. You can work. You can work. Here we go. Oh, that's not too bad. Oh, look at that. So I'm discovering new things every day with you guys. Okay, so in the top left, you see Kharkiv. Okay, Kharkiv, I was telling you, that was my nipple on the Russian border. At the top, you can see that black squiggly line. That's the Russian border. I would say, for example, that heart towards the top is Kupiansk, okay? Kupiansk, I'm going to guess from what I remember, Kupiansk is probably maybe 40 miles from the Russian border, maybe at best. It's not a lot, okay? So we're very close to Russia. Well, what happened was the Ukrainian troops were further west, okay? So further west of that heart for Kupiansk, the top heart. They were further to the west. They came in the last 2 days, just took over a wide swath of land west of Kupiansk and south, okay? Today, it looks like they reached Kupiansk and liberated it. And now they're starting to move south to Izium. There were already reports, Izium is the heart below. There are reports that Izium already was under attack. There were reports that Ukrainian troops had already entered Izium today. There were reports that Russians were fleeing Izium, including a Russian broadcaster who literally broadcast his flee from Izium, saying that he was taking the only remaining artery left to get out of town. Which is really remarkable. I mean, that a Russian was kind of admitting how badly it was going, which reminds me, I'm going to show you a video in a second of the Russians talking about how bad this is. What is interesting is Kupiansk in the north there. Kupiansk is a major railway center, okay? The Russians were using Kupiansk and the railway in Kupiansk to provide supplies to the troops in Izium and near Izium. So from Heart 1 down to Heart 2, they were using the railway to supply supplies. Well, where do you think the supplies came from in Kupiansk, the town at the top? They came from Russia. Well, so imagine now, coming from Russia, going to Kupiansk, the first heart, going down to Izium, the second heart, and then from Izium, they would go south and east and start giving supplies to Russia's entire invasion in the east of Ukraine. Now, some interesting towns there. Look south of the second heart and east. The first town you see is Sloviansk. Look a little bit further east, and what do you see? Severodonetsk. Do you remember Severodonetsk? That's the town 2 months ago that the Ukrainians and the Russians were fighting over for a month. Remember? Well, this is the vicinity of where the Ukrainians in. I don't know whether anybody is saying yet whether they think the Ukrainians can take Severodonetsk, but this is a big deal. A very big deal. The Ukrainians are potentially cutting off. One figure I saw today was 20,000 Russian troops in the Izium area could be cut off from supplies by the Ukrainians because they took Kupiansk. Also, and I don't have the map handy to show you, but hold on, I'm going to go back to my regular layout here. But if you saw sort of how the Ukrainians came in when they were moving towards Kupiansk and then Izium, they came in and basically in two pincers, like a Pac-Man, that started to encircle the Russian troops in the middle. And it looks like the Ukrainians are going to be basically capturing some pockets of Russian troops, and they already are. There were a lot of reports today that the Russians were having a lot of casualties, a lot of deaths. One of the top aides to Zelensky was giving a press conference today, and he said, I think only half jokingly, that the biggest problem they're having with this counteroffensive is they've simply captured too many Russian POWs, and they don't know what to do with them. I mean, it's bad. Now, the other question, some people were worried because of that pincer the Ukrainians were doing where they were about to circle the Russian troops. Some people said, well, but couldn't the Russians do it like if you have Ukrainian, Russian, couldn't the Russians pincer back? And apparently all the experts are saying the Russians don't have the manpower. Thank you for the flowers there. They don't have the manflower. That was cute. I'm thanking you for the TikTok flower somebody just put up. They just don't have the manpower to do it. Let me see. What do we got doing here? Just to look at a couple comments you guys are putting in. It's great that Ukrainians are taking so much back, but hope they have the troops to be able to keep the gains. Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. Marky and Penny saying the one thing that concerns me is it's great that Ukrainians are taking so much back, but I hope they've got the troops to be able to keep the gains they've made. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. So, all right, let me jump back in here. So actually, you know what? I want to show you. I'm going to talk to you more about what the Ukrainians are doing. I want to show you this clip from Russian news tonight. And this is that nightly show in Russia that's really obnoxious. It's the show that they're always talking about nuclear war and nuking Berlin and nuking America. You know, all the crazy stuff we talk about that we're hearing on Russian TV is usually this show. It's this nightly like talk show they do. I've got about a 3-minute clip, and I'm going to show you the whole thing because this is the nightly propaganda show on Kremlin TV, and they're pretty despondent and pretty freaked out about what's happening. Let me, I'm going to put this here so you can see the subtitles. That should do it. And I'm going to shut up for 3 minutes.
Действительно занимаются очень важным делом и сопротивляются громадной орде, подготовленной на Западе, по-другому и не скажешь.
Конечно, как вы сами понимаете, ночь тревожная, и я жду, как вы все, отчетов. Тут там все тяжело, все понятно. Но и не могу не быть тяжело. Это специальная военная операция. Гибнут люди. Это, пусть сами все понимают. Это серьезная, тяжелая ситуация. Серьезная и тяжелая.
ВСУ пошли в наступление. В результате тяжелых боев есть информация, что российские подразделения все-таки покинули Балаклею. Бойцы Росгвардии организованно вышли из города через коридор на восточной окраине. В наступление на Харьковском направлении ВСУ бросила подготовленные в Британии части. Новости тревожные, информация противоречивая. Украинцы празднуют, отмечают победу. Были выложены в социальных сетях у Зеленского лично кадры украинского флага над Балаклеей. Что на самом деле, что с Балаклеей, что с Шевченково, что вам известно?
Добрый день, Ольга. Ну, если честно, я просто в неведении о том, что столицей России была Балаклея, и в нее взяли украинские подразделения. В мое отсутствие столицу России перенесли в Купянск, то есть в Балаклею, и вот сейчас там празднуют непонятно что. Вот, по сути своей, ни Балаклея, ни Купянск не имеют никакого-то сверхъестественного там, какого-то значения для союзнических. Я так думаю, что для нас ничего сверхъестественного в этом нет.
Купянск, безусловно, для ВСУ представляет собой лакомую цель, поскольку это центр пересечения и железнодорожных, и шоссейных дорог. Это тыловая база, которая снабжает материальными средствами практически всю нашу группировку, которая расположена западнее реки Северский Донец. Поэтому цена вопроса велика. Другой удар вооруженными силами Украины наносится южнее.
То есть рассуждать на тему того, что этот населенный пункт не является стратегически важным, ничего страшного, работаем дальше, не совсем было бы корректно.
Да, безусловно, это не совсем корректно. Он имеет исключительно важное значение для снабжения всей нашей группировки войск, действующей в этом районе.
Тревожно, все волны.
The thing is, she's contradicting her earlier guest who's saying, don't worry about it. It's not as big a deal. So it's not correct to pontificate, even to say pontificate that this isn't a big deal. They're freaked out. And look, and that first guy, the first guy who was kind of, let me see, I'm going to pull him up again really quick. Hold on. Where was the...
действительно занимаются очень важным делом и сопротивляются громадной орде, подготовленной на Западе. По-другому и не скажешь.
Конечно, как вы сами понимаете, ночь тревожная, и я жду, как вы все, отчетов. Тут там все тяжело, все понятно. Но и не могу не быть тяжело. Это специальная военная операция. Гибнут люди. Это, ну, сами все понимают. Это серьезно.
This guy is the jerk who keeps threatening nuclear war. Okay, this guy was practically in tears. I mean, he's kind of talking like this and going, "Oh, this is a difficult situation." I mean, these guys are not happy. Again, things can change. We don't want to necessarily say the Ukrainians have won it, but my God, I mean, that's how bad things are for Russia right now. Let me just go into sort of more details here. So Kupiansk, the 20,000 Russian troops are in trouble. Let me see here, the casualties. Oh, this was kind of good too. So last week, and I had reported on this. Remember how last week, hold on. Yep. Yeah, see on his face, he's going to be the next one out the window. No kidding. So last week I'd reported how there was, actually CNN and everybody reported on this, that America had done some war games on paper with the Ukrainians. And our military guys had helped the Ukrainians understand that this counteroffensive they were doing in the south in Kherson, remember? Kherson. Trying to see my Kherson. It's hard to see upside down. But Kherson is a town, and the region down here, that's Crimea, okay? So the counteroffensive the Ukrainians had launched in Kherson a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week plus ago, was had to be limited. The Americans had done war games with them, and the Americans had convinced the Ukrainians, you got to keep it limited to that region. Don't try to go at multiple reasons. You're going to fail. Well, now it looks like that was complete disinformation or misinformation. Thank you for that on TikTok. I shouldn't say disinformation. It was misinformation. It was being disinformation. It was being put out there to trick the Russians because clearly the Ukrainians had big sights on the east. And I mean, it's just amazing. It's amazing what they pulled off here. What else we got here? Actually, and meanwhile, there were also reports the Ukrainians are continuing to hammer away at Russian ammunition depots in Kherson, which is that region in the south. So it's not like that was a fake. I think the attacks in Kherson were real, but at the same time, I think what happened was the Ukrainians had planned to attack Kherson. And we saw, I mean, if you guys have been following my show, for the last 2 months, we've been hearing about how the Russians were slowly moving troops and slowly moving equipment, right? Tanks, things like this, into southern Ukraine because they were getting ready for the counteroffensive. So we knew that the Russians were I don't want to say putting their troops at risk, but they were impoverishing their troops in the east to help buck up the south. Well, the Ukrainians saw that happening too. So I think the Ukrainians legitimately are going after Kherson. They're legitimately trying to corner 20,000 Russian troops that are on the other side of the river and basically surround them. So they don't have basically they're stuck. But they also saw that the Russians were kind of being dumb enough to keep moving. Maybe the Russians didn't have a choice. I shouldn't say dumb. They didn't have a choice. But to move troops, to move weapons south. So the Ukrainians thought, let's surprise them at the same time in the east. So it wasn't like the south was a fake or a feint, but I think they knew the Russians weren't going to expect it in the east and were making themselves weaker and weaker in the east. It's amazing. I'm going to show you another happy liberation video. This is a neat one too. It's not too long, but again, it's like checking out the women's faces and listening to them is just fabulous. Hold on. Hang on a sec. I'm going to make this bigger. Makes me so happy to watch them. So the other thing I was going to tell you, so not only is Russian TV basically for the first time really admitting to people that they're kind of fucked. I mean, they're not doing well. But some of the folks I follow online were saying that Russian nationalists on Twitter Spaces, so Twitter Spaces, I guess the Russian nationalists have been involved there. Russian nationalists are now turning on Putin, suggesting that he is Jewish and in a secret alliance with Zelensky. And that's why the war is going so badly. Again, all of this stuff helps because it starts to depress people at home. It starts to depress the troops. It starts to depress these people themselves who could be a threat to Putin and to the administration in power. Now, I will say one thing that somebody had asked me, I'm already forgetting who you were, was asking me in our Discord earlier today was, could this be enough to provoke Putin into doing something stupid like using tactical nuclear weapons, which are the smaller nuclear weapons that are used on the battlefield, chemical weapons, etc. It could get to that point. The thing is, I think Putin knows if he uses nuclear, then I think it's literally we go to war. I think if there's nuclear weapons, I don't know what we would, it would be a disaster. I mean, I think we would get involved and try to shut the whole thing down. But but if they use chemical weapons, then it's an interesting question. I'm not saying it should be an interesting question, but I think then it becomes a whole thing of that's my nephew. Then it becomes a whole thing of, well, how many people did they kill? Do we know they used chemical weapons? How widespread was it? Was it over a large period of land? Was it over just a couple troops? Like it becomes this whole ongoing debate. Let's see, but I could see some of the NATO folks getting a little weird about that. But nonetheless, yeah, I would worry a bit about what Putin will do. Ukraine is demanding $300 billion. Thank you for the heart there on TikTok. Ukraine is demanding $300 billion with a B in reparations from the Russian Federation. Thank you again for the heart there on TikTok. The UN says that the Russian troops are mistreating Ukrainian prisoners of war. The head of the United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine said the mission documented the mistreatment of Ukrainian prisoners of war by Russian forces at the Olenivka penal colony. And she reported instances of torture, infectious diseases, and a lack of adequate food, water, healthcare, and sanitation. Now, this is something that we already knew about. I mean, so to speak, we knew they were abusing prisoners, but it's important that the United Nations themselves has found proof and is saying that it's happening. At least for the eyes of the world, it's important to document these crimes, and it helps to have it not just be Ukraine alleging it, but the United Nations saying this is in fact what's happening. UK intelligence, actually, this was some good news since you guys often ask what's going on with Belarus. So Belarus, back to the map, Belarus is up here, okay? This is Russia over here, whoop, and this is Belarus up here. Belarus is a dictatorship, a very bad dictatorship. The dictator's name is Lukashenko. Not very popular with his people and big friend of Putin. And Belarus allowed the Russians to go through Belarus and then down into Ukraine. So the Russians attacked from Belarus in addition to attacking from Russia. Additionally, the Russians have been launching aircraft and bombers and things from Belarus. They've been attacking Ukraine from Belarusian territory. So a lot of people have been worried about, could Belarus enter the war, blah, blah, blah. British intelligence is saying that Belarus's ongoing military drills it is highly unlikely that they will lead to Minsk, the capital, Minsk's direct involvement in Russia's war. This is from the British Defense Ministry. Although Russia's use of Belarusian territory was instrumental in Russia's failed advance on Kyiv early in the invasion, Belarusian forces have limited offensive capabilities, and there is a remote chance that they have deployed forces into Ukraine. So that's good. Oh, Lena, thank you for that. There's a new symbol the Ukrainians are using, which is kind of interesting. You know how the Russians have been using the Z, the V, and something else. I don't remember what the other thing was that the Russians were using, another letter. But Z especially, V, but the Z became the big, the Z is the big one that they're using as the propaganda symbol. not just on their vehicles, right, but across the country. Well, the Ukrainians have now adopted a Ukrainian I or E, I'm assuming it's pronounced, that is basically written, I wanted to sort of get a copy, but basically written as a line or like imagine like an American capital I, okay, but with 2 dots over it. And it is a letter that exists in the Ukrainian alphabet that does not exist in the Russian alphabet. So it's why they're doing it. They're kind of doing it as a, I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting. I was talking to Syndicate about this. I want to see about maybe selling some t-shirts or something. It may be too esoteric, but I think it's kind of funny. But I like that they're kind of doing it because it's kind of like it's a letter you don't even have. Now, mind you, the Russians also don't have a Z in their alphabet, so it's a little weird they were doing that anyway. Just pulling up some of your guys' comments. Oh, Lena, again. Kyiv Independent is reporting that Ukrainian troops are at Izium. Yep. This is big for many reasons, including troops from Bucha were stationed. No, I didn't realize that. Okay. So troops from Bucha were stationed in Izium. Now, that's interesting. Bucha. Now, Bucha, I'm not going to find it on my map, but basically, Bucha would have been like, as I recall, up here. Here's Kyiv, the capital. Bucha, I think, was here. So maybe distant suburbs of Kyiv, I want to say to the northwest from what I remember. That was the town that around March 31st or so, when the Russians were pushed back from Kyiv, and the Russians were now basically fleeing to Belarus and to Russia, and they abandoned all these cities that they had invaded. Well, the Ukrainians started moving in, the press started moving in, and they were finding horrific human rights abuses. Bucha is the town, I mean, I always talk about this, the town where that horrible photo of like 2 cars bombed out on the road of one of the main, it's a main road, but it's literally just like a little village. And you've got homes on each side, and there's 20 dead people in the street. They're all civilians. One guy was on his bicycle, and they shot him, and he literally fell over dead. And he's still like on his bicycle dead. Horrific. That's Bucha. Bucha is the town that had just the horrific human rights abuses. And it was the first documented, I think the first documented mass human rights abuses we'd seen, sort of mass genocide from the Russians. So therefore, very interesting if the troops who may have committed that genocide were in Izium, if the Ukrainians are now in Izium. But those were the reports I saw several hours ago as well, were that the Ukrainians were at least on the outskirts, and as I said, the Russians were fleeing Izium. What was this? Some femme fatale. I saw a Russian content creator speak about how whole families were dressing themselves in Z gear, and she felt like she was in a simulation. Yeah, I get it. I mean, you stand up for your military. Like, I get all that kind of stuff, but, whatever. On September 9th, so gas, so natural gas. We've been talking about natural gas. The Russians pretty much shut down a lot of natural gas going to Germany. The Nord Stream 1 pipeline was the pipeline that the Russians kept playing games with. And remember that, it has to be fixed and we can't get the part. And then they wouldn't take the part. Remember, for the longest time, they said, we got to get the part. It's in Canada. Then they got the part. They didn't want it. And now they pretty much said, we're not sending any natural gas through the pipeline unless you lift the sanctions. So Germany and Europe in general have really had to buckle down on their energy consumption. They are trying to build up supplies, and they're doing pretty well. Reserves of natural gas, in other words, natural gas storage right now that they can use over the winter if Russia cuts them off completely, which Russia probably will. And the European Union energy ministers were trying to agree to a energy price cap for natural gas, which is the same thing that the U.S. and its ally, or I should say, or I don't know if it's the EU or NATO. I'm trying to remember here, or if it's the U.S. and our allies, but also trying to agree to a petroleum price cap as well, which basically means a bunch of the purchasers, thank you for the September thingy, a bunch of the purchasers get together and say, countries, we're only going to pay X. If Russian oil is going for $100 a barrel, we're only going to pay $60 a barrel. And there's enough of us doing it. And with oil, at least, they were going to link Russia being able to get insurance, maritime insurance, to accepting the price. So they actually had some leverage with the Russians in principle. Natural gas, I'm not sure what the leverage is, but they were European Union's trying to do the same thing, which is saying, okay, we're going to try to set up, we're going to form a cartel in essence, where we're going to tell Russia, we're only, you're trying to charge this, we're only going to pay this. But they weren't able to agree on it. Yeah, and that's an interesting point. Tired Guy is saying the Germans were stupid enough to announce that they were filling up their storage of natural gas ahead of schedule. That's not a bad point, because I want to say it was maybe a week and a half ago, maybe. Sorry, mom's dog is now barking at the TV. I'm turning the TV off. Maybe a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago max, that the Germans were basically bragging and saying, oh, we're ahead of schedule. We're going to have, I think, like all the gas we wanted. Mom's dog, of course. Really? Should I throw things at you? Seriously? No. She drives me. And the thing is, she's been fine for 40 minutes. She suddenly decided she wants my attention. So she's going to start barking. Well, now she shut up. All right. I don't even know. We were talking about the energy. Oh, yeah. So the Germans announced that they had filled their reserves early and they were ahead of schedule. So the Russians cut them off entirely from the pipeline. So hard to say, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's why Putin did it. Let me see. Final video and then a final thing. A new poll out of Germany. This was actually very good. 70% of Germans say that despite high energy prices, they want to continue supporting Ukraine. 70%. Now, the other thing is, they were breaking it down by political party. It was something like 97 or 96% of Greens. Now, somebody who understands Germany will have to tell me about this, because I don't get it. I always thought that the Greens, were pretty liberal, but to the point where they wouldn't be necessarily favorable of wars. And I know from watching what's been happening in Ukraine, the Greens have been amazing in terms of the German Greens, in terms of supporting Ukraine. And especially this poll number, it was incredible. The number I want to see if I've got it on my phone. I can show you guys really quick. Let me see. At least I may have the tweet. I don't remember if I retweeted. I think I retweeted it. Hang on. I saw it just recently, but again, if I don't have it handy, it's going to be gone. Oh, did I not? I may not have retweeted it. It's funny. I saved. Oh, no, hang on. I've got it here. I think I saved. Sometimes I save these things on my phone so I can show you guys. Come on, Greens. Now, I saw it right before the show started, and I just remembered the number was 70%. Yeah, I don't have it. But I'm very intrigued by what the deal is with the Greens. Just very intrigued. So the final thing. So this was kind of a wild video. I cut out the really bad part at the end that shows these guys like bleeding, but some Russian troops thought they were going to be cute and they were filming a little selfie of themselves. And it was literally right as the Ukrainians were bombing them. But again, there's nothing gross. I just thought it was kind of a fascinating video. But hang on a sec. And then it gets much worse from there. So again, not going to show you the scary stuff. All right, guys. So that is what I've got today for the news. Actually, I didn't think I had much news, but that actually went pretty long. It was only 3 pages worth, but I think so much was going on with this counteroffensive. And the other thing with the counteroffensive to remember is, we're getting bits of, we're getting bits and pieces of what's going on, because we don't know. There's enough we do know about the Russians freaking out, for example, that clearly the Ukrainians are doing well. That we know. Okay, that we know. But in any case, let's jump in with the Q&A. TikTokers, remember, I always tell you guys, if you can, use my profile And I will show you how I do this. My profile on TikTok, you will see the Q&A button right there at the bottom of my profile, Q&A. Click that and leave a question. It's a little more efficient of a way to do it, because that way I can sort of pull them up, and I don't, on the screen, they kind of fly by. I can see it, but they fly by. And for you all, the rest of you here, use your comment box. Also, if you feel generous and you're on YouTube, I, of course, love the super chat questions. Thank you for those. Let me just look here. Let me see. Anything in the Q&A? No, I think that was yesterday. No, it was yesterday. Okay, guys, come on. Give me questions, or we're going to go to the Discord and hang out. Oh, no, here's some. Do you think Ukraine might be advancing too quickly, stretched too thin? No one is saying that yet. The only thing is, it's an interesting point. I mean, well, here's the thing, okay? If you're liberating your own land, it's a little different, right? If you're the Russians, this is just me thinking, but if any of you military folks maybe want to weigh in too and answer this. If you're, oh, thank you for the Christmas lights. I call them Christmas lights. If you are Russian and you're invading Ukraine, every bit of land you take is occupied territory. It's enemy occupied territory. You've got the citizens who hate your guts, right? So that anywhere you go, you've got to leave people behind, because you've got to hold the land that nobody likes you in. You've got to have people administering the land now, right? Like the Russians in the south of Ukraine are having to set up administrations running the town, right? So for the Russians taking over enemy territory, they've got to leave men there, or the Ukrainian civilians pop up behind them and kill them all, right? To maintain order. If you're the Ukrainians and you're liberating Ukrainian land, do you really need troops there once you've cleaned out the city? I'm not convinced you do, right? You may only, I mean, for example, if you're coming this way, cleaning out the land, well, now your front is over here. Do you need troops here if your front is here? No. And because these are friendly citizens, so they're not going to attack you this way. It's cleaned of Russians, so that's not a problem. And as long as you don't have a Russian front up here, but you pretty much need troops at the Russian front. You don't need troops in land you've cleared if it's your land. Anyway, that's my analysis. I think it's a pretty good one, but I'm going to stick with that. All right. Yeah, Syndicate, people are being jerks. Feel free to get rid of them. Oh, that was very cool on TikTok. I hadn't seen that before. Wow. Thank you for that. Now, see, just to remind the TikTok folks, so apparently what's going on with TikTok is the glasses and hats and things like that don't work. Things that actually conform to my face don't work on TikTok when I'm doing this kind of broadcast where I've got the words on the screen. But all the other stuff does. So thank you. I appreciate you guys doing those gifts. That was cool with the flower, with the feathers. I've never seen that before. Yeah, Elise is saying, I'm stuck on that Russian news show admitting to, thank you for the origami, admitting to problems and losses on the air feels kind of anti-Putin, or at least not 100% pro-Putin. I agree. Now, the only thing is, because we're dealing with a dictatorship, I guess we don't know to what degree they don't have any press freedom. So you'd think these people at least are checking in. It's like Fox News. You know, they're checking in every day with the party and finding out what the message should be. So I wonder if, I mean, things aren't going well. Maybe this is an opportunity to start letting the Russian people slowly know that the war is difficult, right? If you notice too, some of the excuses they were making, I didn't mention this, but you notice the excuses they were saying, or maybe it was further on and I cut it, but they were saying, at the beginning, they were trained in Britain. So they were kind of excusing the fact that the Russians were getting their butts kicked by saying the Ukrainian troops were trained in Britain. And again, I love when the Russians do that, because it's such a tell that they're admitting that, oh, well, the Brits can totally kick our ass. So that's why the Ukrainians are kicking our ass, because the Brits totally kick Russian ass. If you're a Russian, why would you want to admit that Brits totally kick Russian ass? And it's the same thing we've been saying with the weapon discussion, and how the Russians keep saying, and they actually say this later on, they say, well, the Ukrainians have top of the line NATO weapons. First of all, they don't have top of the line NATO weapons. They only have a small number of NATO weapons. A lot of it's Russian weapons. But also, so you're saying NATO weapons kick Russian ass? I mean, right? I mean, is that what you're admitting? That the Russian army can't stand up to NATO weapons? Yes, that is exactly what they're admitting. But yeah, no, but it makes me wonder whether Putin is trying to sort of start to come up with start to ease people into knowing things aren't going well. And of course, they're not going well because all of NATO, this isn't Ukraine, this is all of NATO, 30 countries are fighting us. Of course, we'd have a hard time with 30 countries, which again, is not a smart thing to admit. What else we got here? I don't know. Susan's asking, what happened to all those freezer trucks full of Russian soldiers in Ukraine? Don't know. At the beginning of the war, actually, we were seeing interviews with like local, I don't know if it was a local funeral director or what, but he was talking about how he was collecting Russian soldiers' bodies and putting them in refrigerated trucks to keep them fresh to eventually be repatriated, which I thought was kind of amazing. With everything these guys are doing to you, you're worrying about their war dead. Kind of amazing. Yeah, I mean, Mac is raising a question. Will the amount of prisoners taken affect the Ukrainian forces having to police them? Yeah, I mean, at some point I would imagine it gets kind of hard. Now, what you could do, I wonder if, I don't know if you could try to turn prisoners over to a third party like Turkey or so. I don't know if Turkey wants to hold Russian prisoners. It's a little weird, but they'd probably get treated better in Turkey than in Ukraine potentially. But you'd think at some point, that's a really good question for the military folks. How do you juggle, the Aflac is back on TikTok. How do you juggle having such success against Russian troops, for example? At what point does your success become counter effective because you're now having to waste so many troops holding prison camps and all this kind of stuff? I don't know. All right. Hang on a second here. Okay. Well, you're all being far too nice about that Don Juan guy. I just blocked him. Why would you leave that guy? It's cute. It's fun. I will say this for the moderators. I'm always telling the mods, go do a light touch. Don't just ban people for disagreeing. That guy was a Russian troll. That guy you can ban. He was a Russian troll. When somebody says there's freedom in Russia, not like you have in the USA, that person is a Russian. It's a paid Russian, and it's here to cause problems. But I appreciate you you did try to be a nice syndicate. I saw that. But I was finally reading it going like, okay, you're being way too nice. That's a Russian. Yeah, it's our groupthink. I know. We have such groupthink in the West, For example, group thinking genocide's bad. Oh, well. All right, let me look on TikTok again to see if you guys are using the Q&A box. There you go. I did see this. So yes, Antony is saying there was a leaked document from the Russian, I believe it was the Russian finance ministry, actually, showing how many rubles have been paid to families of those killed in action in Ukraine. And the estimate based on how much you get per death was that 49,000 Russians were dead. This came out a few days ago. I shouldn't say a couple. Now it might have been 4 days ago. I didn't report on it at the time because I wasn't sure if it was real. And I also saw some military folks I respect who said, this could be real. It could also be a forged document by anybody to make the Russians look bad, because the Russians aren't giving the truth to their people. This way, the Russian people might look at it and go, oh my God, we've lost 50,000 men, right? So hard to say. Somebody I saw said that if it is a real document, it is certainly more credible from the finance ministry than the defense ministry. But, I will say this too. The fact that we're not hearing anything more about it also makes me feel like, people are a little suspicious to its credibility. Because otherwise, Otherwise, you'd have everybody now saying 50,000 Russian war dead, which is huge, right? So anyway, I sort of hold off on things sometimes when my gut tells me, So, oh, here's another one. Okay, so Equestria guy is saying from Twitch, the Mighty Twitchers, what do you think of the alleged 2-star general that was captured? I'm having trouble believing it's him and not someone who looks similar. That is another story that I didn't report on. Because people were still not sure. The way the story went, there was a lieutenant colonel Russian that was captured. Apparently, lieutenant colonel is a big deal in terms of capturing. The military experts are saying, wow, that's really bad for the Russians if the Ukrainians captured a lieutenant colonel in terms of being in control of what's going on. Then maybe, I don't know, 36 hours ago, folks started saying, this lieutenant colonel looks a lot like a general, a Russian general who is in charge of at least a lot of Ukraine, the war in Ukraine. And people have been debating it. And I have been, whether the lieutenant colonel was actually this general. Again, I didn't report on it because people were conjecturing based on a photo. And that wasn't enough for me. And finally, what I started seeing last night was several of the credible people I like saying, they don't think this is the guy. Now, some folks still think it is the general. Others don't think it's him. So, there was the same mole. Yeah, Lisa's mentioning the guy having the same mole in the ears. He certainly had like a mole right here on his cheek that was suspiciously similar. I agree. So it still could have been, but, the Ukrainians have the guy. They can certainly take a much better photo and see who he is, but it's like I said, sometimes I'm a little careful on stuff when I'm not convinced. I guess I could have reported it as here's what people are saying. And I could have done that and just given my doubts, not my doubts, but saying I'm not really sure. But then I felt like anyway, whatever. Like I said, whenever I've done this on politics for all my life, whenever there's a story that I'm like, I prefer not to really push it. Generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking. He would have been the highest ranking Russian officer captured since World War II. Okay, that is a big deal. Oh, that's funny. Just check his hands and feet. If he's a general, he'll be in far better condition. That's interesting, though. Yeah. He had 2 large stars on his shoulder in the photo. But the fingerprints. But would they have the fingerprints of the general, though? You know what I mean? To be able to see that he was the general. First of all, what would the fingerprints say? How would the Ukrainians have access to Russian fingerprints anyway to know? You know what I mean? Any case, what else we got here? Ukraine has POW. Kelly is saying Ukraine has POW camps in the west of the country that are run according to the rules of the Geneva Convention. Oh, that's interesting. I guess you're right. And you could potentially use civilian law enforcement or something else to police the camp. That's true. Yes, Syndicate is Chinese. I can attest to that. Oh, wasn't supposed to say anything. No, I agree. Let me see what else we got here. Hang on here. Another Q&A. Haven't heard anything about. I've heard the same rumors about the leadership of St. Petersburg, Russia, strongly criticizing Putin, but I've seen nothing about it. Nothing since then. So, again, when you don't see a story kind of blowing up like that, it ought to make you wonder. Russia getting weapons from North Korea. I was asking folks about that, and they were saying that North Korea basically has dumb bombs to give Russia. So they're not giving Russia, GPS guided artillery and that kind of stuff. But they were saying that the artillery shells, for example, that North Korea is giving Russia, and I thought, God, it might have said 1 million, like it was a lot, actually are decent. They're World War I or World War II quality. They're not any stronger than that. But when I was talking to a defense guy about this, I said, okay, the artillery shells are World War II style or even World War I. How does that differ from what Russia has now? And he told me pretty much the same. So they're getting the same quality dumb bombs that they already had, which means it's pretty good for Russia getting them, unfortunately. Now, we can hope that North Korea's bombs aren't in as good a shape or are in as bad a shape as Russia's, but, that's not necessarily as good. Political leadership in St. Petersburg and Russia. I mean, in Moscow, I just can't believe you'd get away with saying that stuff publicly, but, they got called to the police today. I'll bet they got called into the police. Russia suspended issuance of biometric passports for technical reasons a while back. Sorry, see what else we got here. You've got a friend in St. Petersburg. Haven't heard from her in a while. It makes me wonder. Well, hopefully she didn't get in trouble. God, that would be bad. Not sure the mole is in quite the right spot. Transgrams is saying on TikTok. Yeah, Western military certainly knows. Now, I would think that if the Western military thought this really was the general, they would say so. Again, let's see what happens. Maybe we'll find out in the next couple of days that he is the general. I don't know. Now, also, maybe they know that he's the general, but they're not letting the general know that he's the general. Maybe they're letting him think, they're convinced you're just the colonel, just to see if he screws up. It's possible. It'd be an interesting technique to interrogate him. Have him just pretend to be a lowly guy and just see if he screws up about something, Harvey, you're making me laugh. Harvey. What else we got here? Just looking at the previous stuff you guys wrote on here. Trying to figure out emergency heating for friends for coming winter in Kharkiv. Yeah. I mean, that's a scary thing for a lot of people in these towns. What they were telling people was part of the reason the Ukrainian government was telling Ukrainians to leave some of these occupied towns if they could and go somewhere else was just this reason that they wouldn't be able to get heat in the winter. And Ukrainian winter, well, let me see. What's the average temperature in Ukraine in January? Probably depends where, sure. It depends where. Let's see. Kyiv isn't as bad. Daily high temperatures around 30. Rarely, this is Fahrenheit, rarely falling below 15 or exceeding 42. But let's pick a different town. Let's say Kharkiv. Okay. Kharkiv, Ukraine. Daily high temperatures around 28 Fahrenheit, rarely falling below 13, high of 40. Okay. Or February, probably. Daily high temperatures increased by 6 degrees from 20. Oh, that's interesting. So January, what's another town? What's a town that's further southeast? I'm just curious to see. If you're closer to the water, though, let's say Donetsk. Let's stop with that one. Donetsk. No, around the same. Daily high temperatures around 30. It's still freezing. So it's 30 is the average, or did I say the high? Wait a minute. That's the daily high. Okay. So yeah, I was thinking that was the daily average. So the daily high is right below freezing. So the daily high is freezing, and that's the high. Yeah. So the low is going to be in the teens for Americans, which is very high or very cold. And if it's not getting above freezing, you're freezing. So your pipes are going to burst coming into. Think about this too. I don't know how they deal for water in these towns, but your pipes are going to burst coming into the house if you don't have any heat. Your water is going to be a disaster too. Yeah. Well, that's bad. That is bad. All right, guys. Maybe I'll go for another minute or two, and then we'll call it quits because it's 6 o'clock. Well, except Equestria, we don't want the Ukrainian citizens themselves freezing is the problem. You know what I mean? That's the only thing. Russian troops is a different story, right? But Ukrainian citizens is scary. Sasha's sleeping. Oh boy, she's conked out. Actually, it's too hard to show you with that. She's conked out. It's really, hold on. Actually, I can show you. I'm going to put my camera on quiet and take a picture. Hold on. Here you go. Here's the live Sasha shot. Oh, I hate that when it doesn't quite, it's a little too bright on the screen for whatever reason. I don't know why. I mean, you get the idea. You get the idea. You can't really see her face though, because it's cute. Her face, she's just like totally conked out. It's cute. She is like, I even said her name and her eyes weren't opening. She was totally like, but it's cute because she likes to stay. When I actually, for the streaming thing, what I want to figure out next is I can do a second camera. And I was thinking it would be kind of fun to have like a Sasha cam in the corner. Like, because she's always, well, at least here, that's what I'll do the recap. At least here, she's under the table. I would have to do it once I get back to DC. DC's a little tougher because I don't have a bed. I guess I could move the bed under my kitchen table, which is where I do the broadcast. But I think it would be cute to have a little Sasha cam. All right, let me do the recap really quick. So, Kharkiv offensive. Zelensky says 30 settlements have been liberated in Kharkiv in the northeast. CNN says the number could be double. Lots of ammunition and good Russian weapons have been captured by the Ukrainians. Ukrainians have taken the town of Kupiansk, and they are going after the town of Izium, which is potentially putting 20,000 Russian troops at risk of losing all their supplies. And these are also supplies that are helping Russian troops hold eastern Ukraine. So there's a whole domino effect going on here. Hundreds and hundreds of Russian casualties. The biggest problem right now is the Ukrainians are getting too many Russian prisoners of war. I mentioned the disinformation campaign last week of claiming that U.S. war games with the Ukrainians showed that the Ukrainians should only attack Kherson and should not try any larger war goals, which clearly 1 week later was a fake because they had big war goals in the east as well. The Russian nationalists are turning on Putin, suggesting he's Jewish and in a secret alliance with Zelensky because they're so pissed at how the war is going. I also showed a clip from Russian TV that was also really not good. I mean, admitting that things were really bad in what's going on in this counteroffensive in the east right now, and admitting the Ukrainians were doing, not only the Ukrainians were doing very well, but that these cities were strategically very important. Ukraine is going to demand $300 billion with a B in reparations from Russia when the war is over. The UN reports that Russian troops are in fact mistreating Ukrainian prisoners of war. UK intelligence says that it is highly unlikely that Belarus is going to get directly involved in the war in Ukraine. Ukraine has a new symbol of resistance of the war. It's the letter I in Ukrainian that looks like the American I, but has two dots on top. And they're using it because the Russians do not have that letter. So it's kind of a nice way to poke fun at the Russians. The European Union energy ministers are failed to find common ground with regards to capping natural gas prices coming in from Russia. A new poll shows 70% of Germans say that despite high energy prices, they want to continue supporting Ukraine, which was excellent news. All right, guys, I am going to say sayonara. Tomorrow, no, not tomorrow. It's Friday. I'll be back Monday, unless there's World War III. Then I'll come back on the weekend. I will go over to Discord for a few minutes. So if you want to join me there, discord.aravosis.com. The final and then when you go there, scroll all the way down to voice channels, and you'll see John's after show. I should call it John's after party. The other thing is, just to remind you, we've got 3 guests coming up next week. We've got Matt Lewis coming up, who's a big Republican writer and thinker, who's very interesting because Matt has been actually, I've got 3 Republicans who've been very outspoken about Trump. That wasn't really the intent, but that's what we've got. Who's been very outspoken about Trump. And I think Matt's just very interesting on the future of the party, future of our democracy. He's just an interesting thinker. He will be Wednesday, September 14th at 2 p.m. Eastern time, US, 2 p.m. New York City time. David Frum is going to join us on September 20th at 6 p.m. Eastern. David as well, big Republican, got into a lot of problems with the Republican Party all the way back in 2010 because David has been quite outspoken about sort of the growing extremism. And David is a fascinating thinker. I mean, David is probably the most intellectual of the 3 that I'm having on. I just love David, fascinating guy. And the other one who just agreed is Rick Wilson. And Rick Wilson, any of you who watch CNN will know, he'd go on CNN a lot. Rick is this hilarious Republican consultant who has represented the worst of the far-right Republican candidates. But Rick thinks Trump is a total a-hole and thinks the Republican Party's gone off the deep end. Rick and his friends started the Lincoln Project. So that's who Rick is. And Rick is basically a foul-mouthed Floridian. And he just keeps me in stitches because he says it like it is, and he has a mouth on him. And thank God, and I just sort of got the official word the other day that TikTok doesn't have a problem with profanity as long as you're not directing it against someone, like saying, hey, syndicate, you're a blah, 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 right? Then you have a problem. But so hopefully, Rick, we're fine. But Rick is hilariously good. Yeah. I don't have him booked yet, but Rick messaged me last night and said, sure, I'll come on. So I've got but my guess is I'm thinking at this point, a guest a week. If I don't want to book too many guests a week. And again, I didn't intend to have like 3 Republicans who are critical of Trump and pro-democracy, but there you go. Like I said, they're each, but Rick is just so freaking funny. Oh God. Yeah. He's really, he's viciously funny. Anyway, I'll stop talking, but David, I love. David's a good friend, and David is just so intellectually interesting and has such a breadth of knowledge of world history and how it comes together. It's just, I love talking to David. I just learned so much hearing from him. Anyways, so we're going to have good guests. So yay. All right, guys, let's go to the Discord, discord.aravosis.com. Do make sure to follow and like, as I say, especially you TikTokers, follow me if you would to get more updates as we go further. And let's go to Discord, discord.aravosis.com for 10, 15 minutes maybe. All right, guys, I'll see you over there. Bye-bye. I've got to count to 8 because otherwise TikTok doesn't catch up. So 6, 7, 8. There we go.